I recognize that it hasn't been changed, the minimum wage.
I guess I'm just asking you, do you think that's enough for a worker to live on? I'm just trying to get a sense of your vision for what the standard of life for an American worker is.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, for every state, for every community, again, I mentioned Oregon. What happens in Portland doesn't happen in Grants Pass. It certainly doesn't happen.
I understand that about Oregon, but I guess I would ask you, what is $7.25 an hour? That is what in an annual term? Do you know off the top of your head?
Oh,
it's not a math question.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get a sense of it. So it's about $15,000 a year.
Yeah.
So I guess I just want to ask you, do you think that there is a state in this country where someone can live comfortably on their own for $15,000 a year?
Well, I don't know if there is, but I would look and work with Congress. This is a congressional issue. I hope I can support you in telling the story of what's happening on the ground.
But that's what I'm just trying to get a sense of from you is what your vision is.
The Labor Secretary's vision is that she doesn't have one because she has absolutely no thoughts about the lives of Americans that aren't rich enough to influence her and her boss's policy on livable wages.
Right now in America, we have over 22 million workers who are making less than $15 an hour, and nearly 40 million people in our country earning less than $17 an hour. Shamefully, the federal minimum wage, despite the efforts of myself and other people here, have not been raised since 2009 and remains an unbelievable $7.25 an hour. Will you work with those of us who want to raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage to take millions of Americans out of poverty?
Senator, I believe that the minimum wage is more of a statewide and regional issue.
So you don't think we should change the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour?
No, sir.
The Treasury Secretary has thought about it, and he likes that tens of millions of Americans can't live off of their forced minimum wages. By the way, Scott Bessent is a billionaire hedge fund manager that doesn't even want citizens to eat cake, but apparently prefers that they don't eat at all. The Republican Party is tired of acting like your life matters, and the American promise of opportunity is something that they actually believe in.
Would you support getting rid of school lunch for vulnerable kids and breakfast?
When you talk about school lunches, hey, I worked my way through high school. I don't know about you, but I worked since I was, before I was even 13 years old. I was picking berries in the fields before we had child labor laws that precluded that. I was a paper boy. And when I was in high school, I worked my entire way through. You're telling me that kids who stay at home instead of going to work at Burger King, McDonald's during the summer, should stay at home and get their free lunch instead of going to work? I think we need to have a top-down review.
I think you're painting a lot of these kids with a broad brush. I would say that's not necessarily a fair assessment of all of the kids. So you would say all the kids in your district who use the free lunch, for example, or breakfast, they're all just sitting at home and not working. Okay, I just want to clarify because that seems like what you were trying to insinuate.
This gives us a chance. This gives us a chance, though, to see where is the money really being spent. Who can actually go and actually produce their own income? Who can actually go out there and do something that makes them have value and work skills for the future? I mean, how many people got their start in fast food restaurants when they were kids versus just giving a blanket rule that gives all kids lunches in high school who are capable of going out and actually getting a job and doing something that makes them have value, thinking about their future instead of thinking about how they're going to sponge out the government when they don't need to. We don't give people value. We don't give them the ability to dig themselves out when we penalize them for actually working and actually keep them on welfare. That's what's been the inner city problem for a very long time.
But a lot of these kids aren't even of working age. They're young kids, and as you well know, and also some of the kids at Head Start, they're like 5 and under.
Representative Rich McCormick there longs for the American origins of enslavement, or tossing your 5-year-old in the workforce so that he can exploit their labor instead of teaching them. He doesn't expect anyone to ask why he thinks free school breakfast and lunch only applies to inner city students, who he apparently thinks need to be working instead of learning to read. None of these guys are hiding their extreme disdain for Americans.
Well, when I set up Doge with Elon, so back in October, Elon Musk and I flew down to Texas, got Elon Musk to do it, and here was our agreement, that Elon was going to cut $1 trillion of waste, fraud, and abuse. Think about it. We have almost $4 trillion of entitlements, and no one's ever looked at it before. You know Social Security is wrong. You know Medicaid and Medicare are wrong. So he's going to cut $1 trillion, and then we're going to get rid of all these tax scams that hammer against America, and we're going to raise $1 trillion of revenue. And our objective under Donald Trump is to balance this budget, and I'm telling you, you watch it, we're going to do it.
So the Commerce Secretary thinks Social Security and Medicare are wrong because he's salivating over his assertion that no one has looked at entitlements as a way to rob Americans of their money, so that the oligarch crew in the White House can pocket it. You know, Republicans used to act like they weren't eyeing those programs for decades when they weren't worried about it hurting their chances to get in and stay in power.
Some of my Republican friends want to take the economy hostage. I get it, unless I agree to their economic plans. All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal.
But now that they think they've got enough people daydreaming about seeing a trans person in the bathroom, they can be open about it.
Sir, can we get a pledge to stand with President Trump against cuts to Social Security and Medicare benefits?
I think, you know what, when we look to reduce our national debt, I think these should be on the table.
Okay.
You know, so I am a strong advocate of discussing this and reevaluating them. And I do believe at the end of the day, there will be some cuts.
There are cuts to Social Security and Medicare.
Yes.
And that's on the table in the Doge caucus right now.
Well, we're about to find out.
Okay. Thank you so much. So there you have a member of the Doge committee, the Doge caucus, fully supporting cuts to Social Security and Medicare.
You know, the only problem with that question to Congressman Greg Lopez was the claim that Trump doesn't want to cut those programs too. You know, he just couches it in the most transparent terms, where he gives himself an out based on one of the boogeymen that he's got MAGA scared of.
Social Security won't be touched. Other than if there's fraud or something, we're going to find it's going to be strengthened, but won't be touched. Medicare, Medicaid, none of that stuff is going to be touched.
Nothing.
You don't have to. Now, if there are illegal migrants in the system, we're going to get them out of the system and all of that fraud. But it's not going to be touched.
And guess who's conditioning his followers to believe that he's the end-all, be-all when it comes to the truth about whether or not there are illegal migrants in the system? It only took him a day or two to toss out some bullshit as to why he has to rate it.
One person between the age of 240 years old to 249, and the record topper, there is one person on Social Security who's 360 years old, which is approximately 110 years older than our country.
So you see, Musk's job is to secretly come up with the lie to justify their goal of stealing your money and giving rich people and corporations more tax breaks. And Trump's job is to stupidly relay it to gullible supporters that literally applaud being lied to. You may say that it's foolproof, but it actually targets the foolish.
The Social Security Administration actually has its own Inspector General, whose whole job it is to go through its records and see if there's fraud, waste, abuse. The Social Security Administration uses a very old programming code called COBOL. And essentially, there are a lot of people in the system who put in their information before any of these digital records. So their birth date isn't actually in the system. So if this old programming language doesn't have your birth date, it defaults your birthday to 1875, which would make you 150 years old this year. So that is one possible explanation.
The number of outrageous lies that this administration has relied on to build their base is so effective, it's simply become their normal communication strategy, so that people who think for themselves will be exhausted by fact-checking and dispelling each one for the sake of convincing people that have no interest in listening to anyone else except for the billionaires that are robbing them.
You know, politicians have always lied, nothing new about that. But the level that we're seeing right now, the big lie, over and over again, and it goes out, there's a big lie, and then it goes out on Musk's Twitter to, several hundred million people, repeated over and over again. And now the word is out there, people on Social Security, 150 years of age. Can you believe it? The whole thing is corrupt. It's broken. Well, where does that lead you, Caitlin? What's the next step? If government can't do anything, if Social Security doesn't work, if Medicare doesn't work, if Medicaid doesn't work, we're going to get rid of all of those programs, and we're going to give it over to the billionaire class to run it.
That's what you think they're ultimately trying to do.
Yeah, at the end of the day,
get rid of
not only do they,
Social Security.
they want massive cuts to programs for the working class in this country in order to give tax breaks to the very rich, and then they want to move to the privatization of every important government agency.